All right, now with us on Tennis Channel Inside In, you can catch him calling matches. He hosts the 3 podcasts on our Tennis Channel podcast network. Even saw him on Second Serve as well last week. Gill Gross, thanks for coming back to the show. And thanks for, doing the Tsitsipas route and handing out signed photos as well when you're walking in.
What did I do?
The signed photographs, I know you like to do the signed headshots like Tsitsipas does.
Yes. Well, it's always a pleasure to be on, Mitch. Great to do this in person. I believe this is the highest production value podcast in all of tennis. I'm confident in that. Now, you might be modest about it, but I'm going to say it, and I'm going to stick with it.
We make the most with less, so we really do. We try our best to put on a heck of a show. And if you're listening, watching us, Metaverse, YouTube channel, Tennis Channel website, we try to just attack you from all sides, so you just can't get rid of us. But before we go to Indian Wells, and this is, the 5th major, just such a great time of year, the tournament's kicking off, I like to recap. And there's not really segments on this show, but, we got to talk Title Town every week. I want to just give credit where credit is due. 4 different champions last week, starting with Daniil Medvedev, completing the hat trick 3 in a row. He beats Andrei Rublev in Dubai, goes through Djokovic to do that. Medvedev back on track, and what he does and how he does it, Gil. You mentioned how the cardio is just always going to be there. He's in tremendous shape, but he's always played his best when it seems like he's just not taking himself or taking it too seriously. He's so relaxed and confident out there. And this was Medvedev about as good as he's ever looked, in my opinion.
Yeah, so winning 3 titles in a row is supposed to be this really rare thing. Murray did it in 2011, and then we went 10 years on the ATP side without seeing it once.
Yeah.
Suddenly, we've seen it 3 years in a row. Ruud did it post-Wimbledon clay in 2021. Felix did it last fall on the indoor hard courts, and now Medvedev has done it. Of all those 3 examples, Medvedev's is the most impressive because we're looking at 2 500s. We're looking at 3 top 10 wins, 4 because Rublev. So 4 top 10 wins, Djokovic, Felix twice, and Rublev. And it was kind of like his stock hit the lowest point also after the Australian Open. I felt that quarter loss in straight sets, round 3 of the Australian Open, was the most concerning loss that we've seen from Medvedev in like the last 13 months. So I feel like his stock hit that bottom point, and then now 3 weeks, it's just shot up.
Well, it's weird that people, and in general, that's just kind of what we do here as sports fans is what's wrong with this guy who used to win all the time that he's not winning? Have they figured him out? Is he broken? All this stuff. And yes, he wasn't playing his best tennis, and people watch film and figure out ways to attack him, but I was never worried that he wasn't going to be a factor. I think it's fair to always be concerned is, have you lost your spot as the top guy, that rarefied air? But as it stands right now, given the stuff on and off the court with some of these other players, he's very much in the mix to be a threat at every tournament on all surfaces. And how he did it, I mean, he's had Rublev's number in a lot of these matches. It was the Djokovic match in the semifinals that really was a statement that I'm here and I'm back to win. He only beats Djokovic when he's number 1 in the world. Like, that's just how this works.
Right. I know that's a funny stat, no doubt. I think you're spot on there. Like, it's the concern for Medvedev, if you're going to be concerned, and this was the case last year and this was the case 4 weeks ago, was never that he's not going to be in the mix. It's, is he going to be number 1 again? I still have questions about that, to be completely
And that's
frank.
fair.
Yeah.
It's a fair thing, and it's, number 1 is so rare. It's not common. And yes, did he take advantage of an opening in the schedule? Sure, but that's what Andy Murray did in 2016. That's what players historically have done. The comments after, though, I mean, that like the Tsitsipas chill in the air will just never go away between those two.
It's a beautiful thing. It's such a breath of fresh air. Like, I don't want them to like each other. Unfortunately, with things like the Laver Cup, sometimes they are forced to pretend to like each other, and they do that. They're professionals. But rivalries are great. Beef is nice. So
don't pretend to like each other. Like, that's the thing.
Also, like, Tsitsipas's comments were
comments we would make, honestly. Like, does Rublev have weapons is a fair comment.
Sure.
After you lose, and I was working that day, and Jim Courier on TC Live, so that sounds like every guy that I beat in the media after. So it was sore loser-ish. But, Rublev's handled it with grace, too, that it wasn't, it could have been a guy blowing off steam in a tough moment after a loss, which we've all probably said stuff we've regretted in the moments after tough competitive moments or just bad moments there. But, no, I think, look, they're not doing they're not trashing each other personally. They just don't like each other, and they're going to call each other out, and I think it's great for the sport.
Yeah, and that was my take on those Tsitsipas comments a while back on Rublev. Do they make any sense? No. The player with the most variety and artistry is not the better player in a tennis match. The player who won, almost always in this sport particularly, where you can't blame the referees, what was the better player. Especially it's one-on-one. You have hundreds of points in a given match to play against a guy. If you lose, you weren't the better player. So that's that. I agree with you. It does sound like something that we would say. Do you want to talk about the Medvedev win over Djokovic?
I do, and just from the sense that Djokovic's, I guess, conditioning or lack thereof, he was injured in Australia. He hadn't really been able to practice properly. He rounds himself into form seemingly in that tournament after the first match. That was an impressive win by Medvedev, but I think we can say it wasn't tip-top Djokovic shape.
It wasn't.
Yeah.
As much as I would love to give Medvedev the fullest of flowers and say he beat a full-power Novak Djokovic, you watch the match, and that's not what it looked like, and it's not what it was. Novak said coming into the tournament that he didn't train for most of February. Now, I don't know if that's regularly programmed scheduling, where he likes to kind of take a break and take his foot off the gas pedal after that Australian Open because he wants to peak for majors and he needs to preserve his body now in his mid-30s, or if it's because of the hamstring and he had to have a particularly light February just to let that heal. I don't know. Whichever it was doesn't matter. Point is, he wasn't training much in February, and it showed from a cardiovascular standpoint. The long rallies in that match, Mitch, were one-way traffic for Medvedev. And it's not, look, Medvedev is really tough in those kinds of points. I feel like he's been 50-50 with Djokovic in those kinds of points throughout their head-to-head, which has served him really well. But Novak, as much as he likes to point shorten against Medvedev, when the rallies get long, he needs to be able to hang. He wasn't able to hang in this match. Rallies 9 shots or more were 10-5 for Medvedev, which is an absolute blowout, really, when you look at the percentage. And it was a close match. That makes all the difference.
Yeah, those are great points, and it remains to be seen, as great as Medvedev has played, how he does against a tip-top Novak Djokovic. Don't want to take anything away. He won what was in front of him. He won another tournament. He's riding sky high. We're going to come back to these guys in a second, but the other men's champion, Alex de Minaur, wins in Acapulco. An entertaining Acapulco. It had a little bit of everything. That Fritz-Paul match in the semis was just a terrific spectacle itself. But de Minaur beats Paul in the finals, and I'd say this, Gill, he's been much maligned the last couple of years. de Minaur has kind of been, with Kyrgios, that Aussie hope, and he may have plateaued, we had thought, and what's going on there, and he got criticized at home by a lot of his critics, but he wins this tournament, and he's, I guess I would say this, built for those elements. Like if you're going to have a player that battles the heat and has to deal with a lot of chaos, de Minaur is a pretty safe bet to do well.
Yeah, that's why I think it's hard for anybody to really get on him because he's trying as hard as he possibly can. The players who usually take the most heat for plateauing are players who leave room for effort to be questioned.
He's getting the most out of his body and his game.
Totally.
Yeah.
But with that said, all you have to do is kind of track his rankings. There was plateauing. In 2019, he hit 18 in the world, which is where he's at right now. And he was young in 2019. I don't know how old he was exactly, but early 20s. You expect a player to go up from there, and Alex, in the larger picture, kind of did not go up from there. He's been hanging around, and his career high is 15, but he spent 2 weeks there before going right back to 18.
How much of that do you think is the modern game of men's tennis is just getting bigger and stronger?
Size?
Yeah. And that's where he talks about getting the most out of what he does. And his movement's elite, like all worldly. But there is that power question. That's a fair criticism when he gets to the quarterfinals of big tournaments.
Yeah, we don't need to complicate things. A big part of tennis is how hard do you hit the ball.
Yeah.
And for him, off the ground, I don't even think it's the serve for him. I think he gets good MPH for his height on the serve. It's actually the ground strokes, particularly like the two-handed backhand. I think players go there and they know that they're not really going to get hurt there. But the forehand, depending on the position, sometimes it's also a little bit underpowered. If he steps into the court and he gets to throw his entire body weight into it, he can get quite a bit on it. But in a regular neutral situation, he can't. And that has been, I think, what stops him from reaching the upper echelon, no doubt.
We know confidence is a big thing, too. So getting this tournament could be good for him going into another one. It was a good 500 win. It was a loaded field. And just one other note, I love to see, you don't have to get into the ceiling talk with him, but Tommy Paul building off of Aussie was great to see. So many times, American or not, we see big result followed by the letdown, followed by, a lot of publicity. He beats Taylor Fritz and gets to a final against Evenauer. It seems like he ran out of gas, which is understandable given the semi, but another good result for Tommy Paul in this process.
Totally, and this was one of the times where he ran out of gas, and it was completely understandable. Earlier in his career, it was a problem in terms of his recovery and his fitness that
I thought
he would be the first to admit.
U.S. Open, I kind of understood that one too. It was the 5 sets versus Ruud, and by the 5th, it was just dead on arrival.
Yes, that one was also a little bit understandable because he went 5 sets in the first round, and then he went 5 sets in the second round. So then he was in the third round, he went 5 sets again. I think he's shown a lot of positive things backing up the Australian Open. Tiafoe did well last fall after the U.S. Open semifinal. These guys, you're right, the American players, they've done a very good job of building up not just their ceiling potential, but their consistency week to week.
And Fritz, after a couple losses, like that U.S. Open first-round loss to Brandon Holt, goes and wins the tournament too. So they're backing up good and bad results there. And the women's champions as well, I want to give a shout-out to. Donna Vekic wins Monterrey over Caroline Garcia. She's kind of been on a little bit of a tear there, a little bit on fire since San Diego last year in October. Has a run in Australia, wins this tournament. So got to give her some love as well with Pam Shriver working with her there. And then Marta Kostyuk winning the Austin Open, an emotional title for her first title. So 2 women that got titles at points in their career, different points in their career, but getting that added momentum as we head into the Sunshine Double.
A lot of a tear, not a little bit of a tear for Vekic. She's 14-2 on the season now, which is incredible. You have the win in Monterrey, and then the 4-0 or maybe 3-0 at United Cup, and then the run to the Australian Open quarterfinals. So yeah, and then you mentioned San Diego. That was another final. Definitely.
Fighting.
It's been great to see.
Fights out there. A lot of these aren't easy wins either. So there's a lot of battling with her.
That's true. And then Kostyuk, she's overcome a lot. There have been bumps in the road for her. Her progression hasn't been linear, but clearly someone for a long time who's had tons of talent. And great to see her putting it together.
That's someone that's at the top of my list that I can't believe how young she is based on how long she's been around, right? Like, what was she, like 15 or 16 when she was first in that Aussie Open main draw?
Yes.
More with Gill Gross here on Tennis Channel Inside In. Well, let's look at the Indian Wells draws. It's time to kind of just get into the big picture discussion on how this tournament, we could see it unfolding, some storylines, some subplots, starting with the unfortunate of Novak Djokovic not in the tournament. And we don't have to rehash all the ins and outs of that decision of him not being here. But I'm going to ask you this question as the Djokovic whisperer, expert, however we want to say it. Will this, because conditioning is such a huge factor, do you see him not playing in this event affecting him going into the clay court season, going into his Grand Slam chase? Because obviously with the ranking points and where he is, he's not in a position of needing this result. But not playing these 2 perceivable tournaments, is that going to affect him going forward into his chase for Roland Garros and then Wimbledon?
Maybe at Monte Carlo, but then the problem is it's actually a good thing for Novak Djokovic. There's another month until Roland Garros where he really, really wants to be at his best. We have seen him throughout clay court season, actually, and I don't know, maybe the conditions have something to do with this. Monte Carlo's been his worst clay court Masters. Madrid has been a little better. Rome has been the best.
I feel like he's that car that's engine takes a while to rev up in that regard, because a lot of times he's won Miami. He's come over, he switched the clay, and he's just been sluggish out of the gates. But
yes,
I also, like last year, for example, everyone talks about what was the match of the year. The short list is Alcaraz and Djokovic on clay. And it was great. Props again to Carlos Alcaraz. I'm sounding like a wet blanket, but Djokovic wasn't in top tip shape in that match, and he almost pulled it off.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because he hadn't gotten the reps in, and that's my whole, are the reps, not the wins, obviously, in his case, because he's going for Grand Slam, but are the reps more important than actually winning?
Look, you're probably right. I'll push back a little bit because I think if Djokovic had won that match, nobody was going to be saying he was not 100% because it was a great match. The level was sky high. And then he won Rome the next week.
Yeah.
So it is hard to say. I mean, if he wasn't at his best, he was at least close. Yeah. And yes, it was a terrific match. But I also think with Novak, at this point in his career, and yeah, there's been some crazy stuff with the Sunshine Double in terms of him not being able to play since 2019. But even before then, as Novak has aged, he just can't keep the intensity up, and nobody can. This is true.
He said it. When he lost to Roberto Batista Agut in Miami, I think 2018.
Yeah.
He said, or maybe 2018-19. He said, look, at this point in the game, my main goal is Grand Slams, so I'm going to try to win every match. But
so March is a tough month for that.
Yeah. All right.
Right, and Novak has not been in the quarterfinals of Indian Wells or Miami since 2016. So where I thought you were going to go with that question is, what is it going to be like? No Djokovic, no Nadal. How does that play out? Sunshine Double. And I was coming into this Sunshine Double thinking, man, I'm used to this.
Yeah,
this is normal.
I don't think many people would be able to name the last 4 champions of Indian Wells because it's not common knowledge, common names in tennis. That said, Alcaraz, the number 1 seed, is the top dog, which is a nice place for him given what he's accomplished. I mean, we all know where this is going, right? The game is amazing, but health-wise, we're going to be looking for stuff. What are you going to be looking for to make sure, what will you be pointing out health-wise that could be alarming if you see?
Well, first of all, people were asking me at the end of last year in like my mailbags that I do on YouTube, is Carlos Alcaraz injury prone? Because he has that physical style, there is the Nadal standard of, there's no way you can play like that. You can't play like that, right? Without getting hurt. And back then I was just like, all right, pipe down, 1 injury. All right. Like, can we calm down? Now, start of this year, there's been additional injuries, and we're getting to the point where I would never slap like an injury-prone label on Alcaraz at this stage, but we're getting to the point where it's been an issue for him, at least in the last 6 months. There's no doubt about that, and there's been multiple things. With that said, it's hard for me to hit the panic button or really have a good read on what this Alcaraz injury is, because it would have made sense for him to pull the ripcord on Acapulco regardless. After not playing since the Paris Masters, so that's about 3 months out of the game, and then you go back-to-back weeks, I believe it's 9 matches in 12 days with the travel day, back-to-back finals, Buenos Aires and Rio. Oh, now you're going to play Acapulco?
Right, yeah.
That almost doesn't seem like a good idea. So the fact that he pulls out, I have a hamstring, and then, yes, he pulls out of the Vegas exhibition, might have been a little bit shady to pull out of Acapulco and even play in Vegas. Look, I'll say this. If the injury was even minor, he was going to pull out of Acapulco. And as a result, it's hard for me to be really, really worried about the hamstring. However, maybe it could be a big issue.
So the end of that match was so bizarre with Norrie because he wasn't moving. But that just shows you how good he is. He could still play at a close to top 10 level, maybe basically immobile. So I guess my question is going to be with Alcaraz is the Nadal comparison is good. He can adjust. Like, he can adjust little things with his trading off the court as well. It's how he plays. That was Nadal's brilliance. I still think the argument holds true. If Nadal would have played the exact same way for his whole career, he would not still be going, but he made tactical, smart adjustments. Great point. Being young is a benefit in this case that he's going to be able to recover quicker too. I still think it's going to take a Herculean or close to it effort to beat him, an elite level to beat him. If you look at who he has lost to in a lot of these tournaments, they are top players. So that's why you look at Indian Wells, and I don't, he could get Felix in the quarterfinals, maybe Tommy Paul, he's around there as well.
That's who I have him playing, Tommy Paul in the quarters. Hurkacz has been excellent at Indian Wells. That's another potential quarterfinal.
Paul beat him last year, and Paul's got the wheels to keep up with him, to neutralize some of that power. So that's a fun section. Also in this tournament, though, we should give props to defending champ Taylor Fritz. Won his home tournament last year, broke into the top 5, quite the accomplishment. Do you think, and his recent results have been good to not great, has had some tough losses in there. We know how tough he is mentally and physically strong there, but is there any chance the pressure could be getting to him a little bit, that it's starting to seep in that now he's got these expectations on him?
I'd give you a resounding no, but you mentioned the tough losses, U.S. Open, Holt in the first round. And in that situation, you could have said, oh, was it weird to play a buddy? But then at the Australian Open, Popyrin's got big weapons. You have the Australian crowd. But all in all, those are 2 surprising losses at the biggest hardcourt events he's played since winning Indian Wells. So that scenario where it's like, oh, okay, not what you want to see for Taylor Fritz. And I'm sure those losses, stung a lot for him. And he was brutally honest about them, right?
It's like, to whom much is given, much is expected, right? Like top 5 player, you handle that Popper, like you win that match, and if that's the standard we're going to judge this guy on, top 5 guy, then that's not a good loss. I still think what Fritz can do on a tennis court, the weapons, we always talk about weapons, like he has them. Like there's no doubting that. I look at this draw though. I mean, Ben Shelton round 2 would be pretty tasty. Yeah,
that's a popcorn match. I'm going to give you my favorite Taylor Fritz stat. I was digging into the numbers because Indian Wells and Fritz, it's the kind of thing where I don't think it's any coincidence that he won the title there and it was the biggest title of his career. Like, he's just better there.
Yeah.
And it's not just the last 2 years.
Yeah.
You can go back even further to when he was a wild card. He beat the number 6 seed, and I actually forget who it was. It might have been I don't remember, but he pulled off a big upset early in his career. Here's the stat. Oh. As the lower ranked player at Indian Wells, Taylor Fritz is 10-5.
That's pretty juicy.
Right? Overall 16-6, but that tells you that Fritz, according to the ranking system, which all in all does a pretty decent job of predicting success, Fritz is winning as an upset.
I would need the gambling lines just to confirm, but I see what you're saying. That he enjoys playing there. It's the comfort of being there, but also how the court, how it plays there benefits what he can do. I also think that, last year, and we all saw the Netflix show and everything and what goes down, but he rounds into form around this time. And he's also somebody that's been brutally honest about how he likes to use this as a launching pad, not just for these 2 tournaments, but into the clay, into the grass court season. So yeah, Fritz is a pretty safe choice to do some good things. I mean, Ben Shelton is going to be a tasty matchup, but he's got another opportunity. I think my answer to my own question would be he'll feel the pressure, but maybe not here. Like other events, other places as the top seed, but this is where he'll be fine.
It's special for him. And by the way, he beat Cilic in 2017. Cilic was world number 7. Fritz was 136 at the time. And then the next year, 2018, Fritz is 74 in the world, and he makes the 4th round. He beats Rublev, Opelka, Verdasco. So it's just year after year, the guy overperforms. Yeah. And I say that in a good way. At Indian Wells, it makes him better.
Let me ask you this, because this has been a breakthrough tournament for a lot of different players on the men's side. Who could you see that we haven't named that could have a breakthrough?
Great question.
Semi-final champion. I got some names here. I didn't want to lead you, so.
I have 2 names.
Okay.
The first one is Yuri Lehechka.
Didn't have that one, but I love it. That's good.
He's got really, really big power. I mean, he hits as big as anyone. Mostly the forehand, because, that's how it is. But even the two-handed backhand, relative to other two-handed backhands, is very, very big. Other than that, he's, very level-headed on the court, fairly consistent. Mm-hmm. Think Berdych, and he's Czech. Yeah. He's Czech, and I don't like to do that to players. I don't like to just compare them because they're from the same country, but he's very similar to Berdych, and I believe he grew up training at the same academy as Tomas Berdych, so it does make a bit of sense. My other name is out of right field, or left. I don't know, whichever one.
You can use either.
All right. Yeah. Alejandro Davidovich Fokina.
Wow. Yeah. Wasn't expecting that.
I know. I'm going for the deeper cuts than.
So, other than, I guess, Dubai being like his just nightmare scenario, because like Davidovich Fokina, every time he plays in Dubai, has match points on great players and just can't finish it off. I actually respect that one because there's been that false assumption that he's a clay court guy, but he actually does pretty well on hard court. And that's the pains of tennis, right? The draws have been brutal to him. Like he hasn't had the opportunity, but this could be one where it opens up. What is it about his game that you think suits him well here?
Well, it's slow. Indian Wells, it's the kind of hard court where, with the exception of movement and
it's that Rafa effect where like he'll do better here than he will at Miami.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So I'm absolutely thinking about that. With Fokina, the weakness of his game technically is his serve. Now the weakness of his game is not technical; it's mental. Yeah. But technically, it's his serve, which means he just needs a slow surface so he can break serve a lot and get into plenty of return games. But to me, if you ask me who's the guy with the highest upside outside of the top 15, maybe top 20, it's him. I don't hesitate. It's him with the speed and power that he possesses on the court. I think he's a top 5 mover in tennis. I'm just kind of waiting for his breakthrough, and I feel like he's worked really hard on the mental side. I know the Rublev thing is not a great example of that. He took a set off Medvedev. Maybe I'll be completely wrong, but I feel like he's been knocking on the door against top guys in conditions that don't suit him. And here at Indian Wells, after heartbreak in Dubai, I just almost feel like he can come here and break through. I'm waiting for it for him.
On the other side of the draw, what would you say would stop us from Medvedev Tsitsipas semifinal? What player? What in the other in the individual players I named win their games? What prevents us from seeing that? So that rivalry.
Yeah, what prevents us from seeing that would be Tsitsipas's shoulder. Mm-hmm. Now, if it's healthy, I have Tsitsipas doing great at this tournament, even though the history isn't great. What prevents Medvedev from reaching the semifinal is the surface, which should not suit him. No. And I don't think it's a great assumption. Now, it could happen, but I don't think it's a great assumption to think Medvedev is going to go to the grittiest, slowest hard court in the world, go from Dunlop Australian Open balls, which he's been playing with for 2 months, to Penn tennis balls, and fly across the world, and it's going to look exactly the same. I don't think it's a great assumption.
I mean, if he wins this tournament, then we really have to just
level him up.
There's not many more levels to go, but he'd be getting closer and closer. Right, and the injury thing with Tsitsipas is a good point because we really don't know what's going on there. But we've also known in his past, he's done this before, right, where he's come in maybe a little banged up, maybe a little hurt, and then he looks fresh as day, and he's flying around the court out there.
Yeah, and these conditions should suit him. Plenty of time on the returner serve, plenty of time to create forehands. I love these conditions for him. Now, it hasn't played out for some reason. He hasn't played well here. He made a quarterfinal once. That's it. Medvedev has never even made a quarterfinal.
Yeah.
I think for Medvedev, the thing to watch out stylistically, by the way, is a speedy opponent because that's where he could have trouble finishing points, and that can frustrate him. So I would look at potentially Nishioka, potentially if my dark horse comes through, Davidovich Fokina. Okay. But it could be Khachanov. If it's Khachanov, I think that would be the ideal quarterfinal.
That guy's tough. I
know he's tough. Yeah. I know he's tough, but he's not the style of opponent that I think would most concern Medvedev. In fact, he doesn't come forward like the guys who bother Medvedev, and he doesn't run like the guys who bother Medvedev.
I noticed she didn't say Casper Ruud in there.
Yeah, Mitch. It hasn't been good.
It's been we're on the verge of needing the discussion. One more result, and I think we're gonna have to have that talk about.
He did just take a break.
Okay.
He did not play in February. He was not grinding at the golden swing, which he did last year, which I actually criticized him for doing last year. I said, look, you don't need to be winning clay 250s. We know you can do that. Yeah. Go to Rotterdam and work on those aspects of your game against the best in the world.
All right, more with Gill Gross here on Tennis Channel Insight. And I want to finish this up with some talk on the women's draw. And it was about this time last year where we convened and talked Iga Swiatek. And Indian Wells was not the start of her run, but the start of her big-time run. It was when she really got going, won this tournament, won Miami, went to the clay, won every event she played there. She comes back to this tournament confident. While all the results haven't been there, her confidence hasn't wavered, and she comes into this tournament as the top seed. And a pretty standard bet in a lot of cases, and I'll let you poke holes in this if you want, but she's been pretty consistent at the very least, getting deep into tournaments. It's that big three level of consistency. So do you think there's any doubt that she doesn't at least win a few matches and get to the later stages?
I don't have any doubt, personally. I think the conditions are really nice for her as well. Everything I look for at Indian Wells, I'm looking for heavy forehands, damage from the back of the court. I'm looking for speed. The serve, I don't think hurts her as much at Indian Wells. She's going to be able to, first of all, defend when her serve gets attacked. She's going to be able to defend better. And, that's how we've seen players like Rybakina at the Australian Open or even Pegula at the United Cup hurt Iga, is to rush her on that first ball. Plus, on her own return of serve, it's unlikely that a player like, Sabalenka is going to be able to, or Rybakina for that matter, is going to be able to really get tons of purchase out of their serve against Iga, which is another kind of path to victory against her. So I like the conditions. It'll be interesting with the Krejcikova thing now. Barbora's the only player who can beat her in finals.
Yeah.
So that happened again. I don't know how much illness.
We heard the same stuff that she may have been sick, and I love the fact that she didn't use it as an excuse or bring up anything. It is funny with Krejcikova because she is the only player that plays the way she does, maybe on tour, but it seems like there's this like template of, if you have a chance at Iga, it's the big girls with the big serves and big weapons. And Barbara's not like that. It's just her uniqueness makes her difficult, which is why in this draw, Andreescu round 2, former champion, it doesn't really threaten me too much with Iga. It would be the big hitters, like if Haddad Maya gets there, if it's somebody like Samsonova down the stretch, Rybakina or Sabalenka in a final. But yeah, how the conditions play, Iga's weapons, her confidence, her being healthy, no worries until we get into quarterfinal, semifinal land.
Yeah, and terrific draw, I think. I mean, I know BB is there, and that's a dangerous name, certainly. But I think Garcia as the 5 seed, opposite ends in these conditions, probably a good thing.
I have something that I wanted to ask you in terms of Garcia and then even Sabalenka. Like, you have your career year, your career milestone. I don't know that I have my doubts about how you follow that up. The women's game is known to be a graveyard in that immediate aftermath of accomplishments. Iga's so rare. And Garcia felt the pressure at Lyon, losing that final. And then we also have the fact that Sabalenka, I mean, she had match points against Krejcikova, couldn't win that one. We'll see. I mean, there is that thought process that the letdown is coming or might already be here.
Caroline has looked stressed all year.
Yeah.
And when there's stress in her game, very hard to execute. I mean, the offensive nature, the attacking nature of it, you have to bring confidence with that play style. Less so than someone who might be able to rely on their legs and play it a bit safer. Garcia can't do that. So with Garcia, I think there's that concern, especially because last time she got to world number 4, it was very difficult for her. Now she's more mature. She has that experience. You would hope she would handle it better, but she's looked stressed thus far. Sabalenka, I'm not too worried about. I actually think her ability is so terrific that I don't see anything stopping her. I think she has too much going for her.
So the loss is just, it happens, like close matches, just couldn't. I mean, because I see that side of it too. The loss in Dubai where you have the match points and you just can't get it done.
Yeah.
Happens. Although, if you want a live upset pick, if it's Vekic Sabalenka, I know Sabalenka beat her at Australia, but the head-to-head's in Vekic's favor. It's early. If you're going to trip up Sabalenka, I put her in that category of players that might be more prone to an upset early as opposed to finding your confidence and doing well later. And just one other note on that regard, Rybakina as a 10 seed just seems criminally underseeded. And because she'd probably be your 3rd or 4th pick to win the tournament, roughly.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see, because I'm not sure that we've gotten this answer on Rybakina. What does her surface versatility look like? Does she need the court speed to reward her serve? Now, I'm just pulling up her splits live, and let's see what this looks like. On hard court, her win percentage is, is 63%. On clay, it's better. She's 31-16 on clay, so a better win percentage early in her career. That's something to monitor. That's interesting. For some players, the big power is actually very helpful on the slow surfaces.
Yeah, there's your trivia. She was the last player to beat Serena, right, at the French Open?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, her game, I mean, Australia was like the eye-opening thing. It's like, okay, you think I'm just a fluke champion at Wimbledon, watch this, and how she did it and who she went through was pretty impressive. Yeah, there's something about a player that doesn't need to be surface dependent, like you said, like that could really just maybe be that all-surface type player. You also have the questions in this draw of what levels, just like the men's side, like what level are we going to see on Shaborat coming off of an injury? And then I guess the mental side would be Maria Sakkari, last year's finalist, which I couldn't believe, by the way. One title. Just kind of makes you scratch your head, right? She's got one title in her career.
Yeah, it's a big understatement there. It definitely makes you scratch your head. It's been finishing tournaments. She has a terrific record in quarterfinals. She has and she gets to a lot of quarterfinals. Yeah. She has a very, very, very poor record in semifinals, and she's 1-4 in her career in finals. I mean,
and those finals aren't, I don't want to say aren't usually close, but a lot of them haven't been too close from what I can remember off the top of my head. French Open that year, the Barber match was tough to swallow. But I think Maria does well here, like you mentioned, surface and everything.
Yeah.
Confidence is key for her, which you could say for a lot of players. But I hope Anjabur's at a high level. Mention her, but, we don't know. That was another thing. She's played so much tennis to get to that point. And unfortunately, you could see the body breaking down in a lot of ways.
Yeah, you can. I would, I guess, temper expectations for her next couple of events. It was sad to see her miss the Middle Eastern swing also, because obviously she, in that part of the world, has done so much to grow the game. Yeah. So, yeah, hopefully we see her back at full power. And then I think the other contender to bring into the mix here would be Coco.
So I was going to ask you this, as kind of the bow on it. Is that your American that you feel the most confident in going deep into this tournament? Or you could go out of left/right, left center field.
Conditions-wise, yeah.
Yeah.
Pegula has really earned tons of respect.
It's like, what more does she have to do other than win a major?
Yeah, she's earned tons of respect. But if I'm comparing Gauff and Pegula, and I evaluate them in general pretty equally at this time, with these conditions, Coco is going to be very, very hard to hit through.
So and you would be a good person to ask this question, because we talk about like women's tennis and winning majors and all this stuff. Doesn't it just seem unfair that I'd say Coco and Pegula, like maybe their best chance to win a major best surface would be on the clay, but oh, by the way, that's Iga's best surface. So, I look at Coco from the perspective of I love so much of what she does, and she's so consistent and solid and professional, but she gets into these big matchups with Iga and other players, and they just break down her forehand and they break her down. And what she's done is to be lauded, but that last level is proving to be very, very difficult.
Yeah, it's a strange situation with her, because you're right. She's so far ahead of schedule.
So far.
But it's like when one thing is really the roadblock, and for her, it is her forehand.
And only the best players can stop her, even with that.
Yeah, because you gotta get there quickly. You gotta bring pace and quality to that side. Yeah. If you're gonna hit lollipops over there, she's gonna be able to handle it just fine. And by the way, if we're bringing this to kind of Indian Wells, she'll have the requisite time on the forehand, and it'll reward her heavy topspin on that side, which is another reason why I do think the conditions are quite nice for her here. I will say, though, the offseason for Coco wasn't quite what I wanted to see. I was hoping that we'd see some real visible changes on the forehand side, and it looks pretty much the same. And she can still be a great player with that forehand. Yeah. She's proven that. But I would like to see some bravery and some boldness, like we saw with Sabalenka. Sabalenka being like, I'm in the garage here. Now, I know it got really bad for her, arguably worse than it has ever been for Coco, but I'm going to hire, a biomechanics guru, McMillan. I'm forgetting the first name. I am going to fire my psychologist and completely rethink the way I'm doing the mental game. I'd like to see a little bit of that from Coco.
It's tough to do when you're so far ahead of schedule, as we said, still a teenager and into the top 5. So it's like, but I agree. I think there's some tactical changes and some big adjustments she can make, but still the results are there. And I agree with you. of all the Americans, Jessie included. I know it sounds like we're putting her down a little bit, but Coco in this condition, on this surface, seems most destined. Well, Gill, this has been fun. I'll just wrap with this. Any other women's dark horses in the mix? Any other outside the field that you think could make a move and maybe, hoist that trophy?
Trophy. We're talking big time here. I think Ostapenko is one to watch here.
Always is.
She's always one to watch.
Electronic line calling. Yeah, it's going to be another event.
Yeah, exactly. I'm excited to see what Krejcikova does to follow up what was a run that was as impressive as any ever. And that's not hyperbole with the players that she was able to get through. We've seen her have a lot of success on the slower surfaces and, getting to peaking at number 2, having the injury, taking a long time to really get back to form after the injury. I'm still not clear on if Krejcikova is, you're going to contend for every big title now, or if she's a little bit below that level. Yeah. I feel like she can be there, and I'm excited to see what she does as well.
I'm always monitoring. I know she's a higher seed, but Belinda Bencic, I think she could be a threat.
Tough for her. This is not good for her.
No.
She's changing. I agree. She's someone to watch in 2023. She's changed the way she goes about it a little bit, where I think she's trying to hit her forehand more traditionally to actually get some rotation, some topspin on it, and be able to hit it cross court. Dmitry Tursunov is really changing things.
Yeah.
That's another player.
He gets everybody better. It's my reason for backing her more than anything.
And I think what he does is like, you're hiring me as the coach. I don't care what you've done in your career. We're going to make some changes.
Also understands why explains why it may not work out with other players that may have thought about bringing him on. Pretty obvious.
Totally.
I'm thinking of there.
Yeah.
But no, maybe not to win this one. You're right. But just to kind of, because I've always thought even before Tursunov, she has something like she has that fight tenacity that is a rarefied air thing. So
and talent.
Yeah.
She plays completely differently from anybody else. I don't think there's anybody with better timing and redirection skills. She just needs that. All right, like you have that, I'm going to absorb pace and redirect down the line thing going. Now you need to just be able to generate your own. Right. And that's kind of the piece that I think Tursunov is going for.
Well, I can't wait, Gill. This has been a blast. We'll catch you, all on our Tennis Airwaves podcast, broadcast, Second Serve show. Appreciate you coming on and, enjoy. And now you're an LA resident, you're a local too. So we got to, get your advice on all the LA eatery and stuff because I know you're a food guy.
Yeah, we can do a 30-minute podcast on that anytime. Great to be on with you as always.
Appreciate it.